that energy high for this last session, and that's pretty easy because we are talking about content creation, one of my favorite topics. I am Nicole Casperson. I am the founder and creator of the What the FinTech newsletter. I write about the many ways that technology can bring real equity to financial systems. I also host a podcast called Humans of FinTech and events called FinTech is Femme. With me is Kyla Scanlon, founder and creator of Bread, and Emily Binder, founder of Wealth Voice. So these ladies know the ins and outs of content creation. If you don't know who they are, you maybe live under a rock, so get on those socials and check them out. But thank you guys for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Nicole.
Right, yes, okay. So I kind of want to jump right in and talk a little bit about how social media platforms have really transcended and become cross-generational apps that give businesses access to audiences of all age groups, right? I think there's a misunderstanding that maybe social is only for young people or teens or young adults. But here's some fun stats for you. 42% of all TikTok users in the US are between the ages of 30 and 49, and 11% are above the age of 50 years old. So would you mind giving a breakdown of the audience demographics that you are working with? Kyla, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I primarily do TikTok, Instagram. I'm on Twitter, have a newsletter as well. On TikTok, it's definitely much more of a younger audience. So I'd say 25 to 30 is where those people primarily reside. But then within the newsletter, you do have an older demographic as well. So it is interesting how content hits different demographics, yeah.
The content that I create, which is for a few different brands, mostly on Wealth Voice though, is, I would say it's reaching people between 30 to 65. It's really everybody in the space. And TikTok, I haven't created anything. I consume it, but a lot of Twitter, definitely Instagram, but voice primarily. Mini pods, flash briefings, voice memos, hands-free. So that's where I think it's all headed. Multimodal, but a lot of voice control.
And let's just right away address maybe one of the bigger questions around how content creation really does directly impact the future of wealth generation. And that inspires my content. I'm sure it inspires some of yours. Kyla, how about you from the TikTok standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you have to reach people where they are, and if they're on TikTok, you have to make content that is on TikTok. I would say that a lot of people are resistant to the short-form video style of creation because it feels silly. But if you're able to make things fun, and sometimes content around finance has to be fun in order to bring in, the new generation, a younger generation. So yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think about it, and it's even yes for young, but also, why not also all older people or all ages, right? I do think that generally enjoying fun content and consuming content about your work in a fun and engaging manner. Come on, we all love memes. You know what a meme is. It doesn't matter how old you are. You all love GIFs. Why not consume content in that way? It doesn't have to be the old guard. You don't have to rely on just traditional media publication articles to learn insights from your industry. You can do it in a way that makes you feel like you're having a nice time. But
that's true. And I was doing some research for this panel, and there's a lot going on algorithmically. Where are people finding content? Younger people, less on Google, less on search.
Yeah,
and I think you found stats something like 42% of Gen Z will first search for information on TikTok or Instagram. There's almost a perception of Google as being a little old hat. It's not the brand where they go, and right or wrong. But the whole snackable content thing is huge. It doesn't mean stop blogging, stop doing long form, but you also have to make it snackable. 96% of BuzzFeed quizzes are completed. That's insane. People, it's enjoyable and fun, and you can do that with just top tips or FAQ, the things that you're already talking about, make it snackable.
Speaking of that, here's 24 hours. That is the time spent watching content on TikTok. And that is more than the average for watching YouTube, which is wild. So short form content really is it. It's the future. I'm working on some of it myself. But Kyla, I think it's interesting because how long have you been working on your TikTok?
It's been over a year, yeah.
All right, okay,
yeah.
And you've already blown up. What did you have an inkling about creating short form content? How did it kind of start out for you to say I should make finance content in this medium?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two layers to it, right? Like the first is what I was saying a little bit earlier. Like if people are on TikTok, like you should be on TikTok if you're going to be a content creator. And then I think there's also like a huge market opportunity for short form video finance content. Finance can be broken down into bite-sized pieces, and I think if you're able to do that, that's going to onboard so many more people into finance. It's going to help so many more people get educated about what it really means. So it's number one, like meeting people where they are, but then also doing things in a different way that sort of shakes up how we traditionally receive content around the stock market or the economy or crypto. Yeah.
Did you ever have like a video that really just kind of took off and changed the trajectory for you?
Oh, I mean, I think like with a lot of content creation, it's iteration. So you have to produce every day at the same time to appease to the algorithm. But if you make a video about like Michael Burry or something, like people are going to watch that, and that generally tends to help. So playing into the algorithm, playing into the media cycle, but then also like just being somebody that people can trust, I think is also super important for just continued growth, as you know. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It is. So, folks will want to consume information from you because they trust you. And frankly, they'll trust you more than an institution, right? That is the way the world is changing. People follow people, not institutions. So that's kind of the beauty of the creator economy. I mean, Emily, from your seat, do you think about ways to convert even like the podcast realm into more of those short form video contents?
Definitely, Nicole. I'm always talking about audiograms. So if you don't know what an audiogram is, you've probably seen them on social media. It's a short clip. It is essentially like a video file, but it's just audio. There's a still graphic, and then you've got captions running along the bottom. And this is the best way to promote a podcast. If you're tweeting out a link to a podcast, like here's the Apple Podcast link, here's Spotify, go listen, one sentence about why you should invest 45 minutes of your life in this episode, it's not as effective. But if you give them that preview, there's a lower perceived commitment. So it's easier to get people to listen that way. Audiograms are great, but I think just the entire, make it short. With Wealth Voice, for example, updates maybe 3 minutes long. You don't need to do more than that. Just one quick hit.
Then I think a question I get very often is how I pick the topics that I cover. A lot of it has to do with just, if I think it's interesting, I imagine the people following me think it's going to be interesting. That's not as scientific, but there are instances where, when inflation, the hashtag inflation saw a nearly 1,900% increase in videos with the hashtag inflation were watched as people came to platforms and Instagram Reels and TikToks and YouTube Shorts to learn about what's going on. I mean, when you hear something like that, how do you pick some of your topics?
Well, this is interesting because I've had a YouTube channel. I think I've had it for 10 years, but I only started really creating videos on it maybe 3-4 years ago. And the first video I did, which was a video about something I wanted to learn about, it wasn't about marketing, it wasn't about voice or business. It was how do you file an LLC, because I was going through the process and I found the information shrouded and confusing. And I was like, why don't I make a video? And then it has like 65,000 views, and it didn't intend for anything. The channel got monetized from that. Just what are people asking for that you're trying to figure out and find challenging, and then make the solution?
Did you ever have like moments where you were like, okay, so I need to find a solution to something, so I'm creating content that does that for myself, but I don't know, I feel like sometimes you can struggle with the battle between, okay, I think this is interesting, but I don't know if my audience will. How do you, in your different ways, kind of overcome those moments of like dread where you're like, oh, will this resonate with people? I don't know.
You can't be married to the outcome.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Not everything's going to be a hit. You can delete it if it's that bad, but I've had plenty of content I put out that I thought was cool and no one else did, but then something else will resonate eventually.
Yeah. What about you, Kyla?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, I don't know if the right word is a meme, but it's like a thing that the thing that you work hardest on and you're like most proud of usually gets the least amount of traction. So it's just kind of funny how content works like that. But I think, like I said earlier, it really is about iteration. So like if you keep on producing content, something is going to hit somebody in a way that they didn't really expect it to. So oftentimes I find that people don't sometimes know what they're looking for. So if you can make a video that addresses like a basic concept, like more questions will stem off that, or a newsletter or whatever, more questions will stem off that, and then you're able to address more questions from that. So it's kind of like you have to build a cake with your audience, and there has to be a layer to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the sense of like community as well. So when, despite if you have 100 followers, 1,000, 1,000,000, whatever, when you create content that is so specific to your audience, whether it be you're wanting to be a content creator, whether you're an advisor or a wealth manager and you want to create for your clients, there is a level like of trust, yes, but also they become almost like your friend. I know that seems weird, but it's in today's world, it is not weird. People want that personalized experience. They want to get to know you. They don't want to just get their financial advice or information from someone that is like a robot that doesn't have any feelings or passions or dreams or is a real human, right? So I think that also is helpful, regardless of the content you create. It is true to you, and if one person likes it or 1,000, that it takes that one person to start word of mouth, right? To start sharing your content to someone else, and then that grows and grows and grows. And so I think that leads us to consistency, honestly. Being consistent regardless of maybe not getting growth that you want to see right away. Have you experienced this? Yes.
Consistency. Yeah, I used to talk about consistency. I've changed my mind about that. So I think with podcasting in particular, if you look at the stats, there's been a 400% increase in consumption of streaming audio on smart speakers and a 200% increase in podcast consumption on smart speakers, so voice assistants. This is on mobile, it's on smart speakers, it's in the car, it's on Fire TV. Obviously, I'm talking about Alexa in particular, but people are getting the content that way. Do you have to do it every week? Do you have to do a 45-minute interview and make it a whole hassle? No. You can make it short. You can drop it whenever you want. So that lack of formality and kind of thinking, oh, maybe we could reinvent what this means to do a podcast, I think that's huge. And it feeds the short form content we were talking about, like audiograms or even TikTok videos.
How can someone just starting out maybe start to decide what medium they should begin with, right? I know I get overwhelmed because I've got to post my Twitter thread and then I got to like put it on Instagram in a different way. Like people, you might think you can just copy and paste everything, but you have to completely, repurpose your content so that it is native to each platform. That sounds overwhelming maybe to someone that's just getting started. So is there a platform that you think in particular is like a great starting point, or what would you say to someone that's just getting started and being like, what platform should I use? Kyla and Emily?
It depends what you're comfortable doing. Some people are very natural on video. If you don't, or if you're a woman and it's time consuming to get ready for a video, just drop a voice memo. Like, it's a lot easier. So with these mediums, especially podcasting, the barriers to entry have gone down so much. Even if you look 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's like grab a microphone, use Libsyn or Acast. It's easy, but that means the leverage has decreased because it's more crowded. So think about where is this headed. This panel is called The Future of Content Creation. We know what's working today. I mean, obviously TikTok's the big app right now. What about 3 years from now? And I'm looking at it from the perspective of with voice and multimodal and people getting content on different channels, right? So getting ready for that, I think looking at voice is huge, but it's not just that. It's tap, type, and swipe. It's voice first. It's video. So what are you comfortable doing? What's easy and natural? Where do you feel like you're able to get your message out without being nervous or annoyed at the fact that you have to do it?
Yeah. So when I first started on TikTok, I didn't know how to edit videos at all. So it was definitely a big leap, but I think it's not always about the platform itself, but about what you're talking about. So I think if you're getting started with something, you just have to make sure that you're passionate about it. And people will sense your passion through whatever that is, whether that be a newsletter or a YouTube channel or a TikTok or voice. I think that there's a lot of different opportunities for people just to showcase that passion. And there are barriers in the form of how do you even begin to learn how to edit a video, but you can sort of learn that over time. So it is that repeated iteration. But I think if you really care about something and if you want to talk to people about it, you just kind of have to put pen to paper, and just start wherever you think you can. Yeah.
With TikTok, I think this is kind of a challenge to the industry, which is you've seen a lot of the really popular fintech content comes from people that aren't necessarily advisors, and it can be kind of DIY. So there's this gap of where are the actual certified experts and why aren't they here? So people are filling in that gap, and some of the information is not accurate.
This is true.
Yeah, that's where it gets dicey.
It does get really dicey. Yeah, and that goes back to your point about there being really low barriers to entry and the opportunities for people to talk about their passions on different platforms.
Yeah, so we know it's essential to create content, but I think another question that I run into often when folks ask me is, all right, well, but my audience they aren't there. We know this is like a BS excuse. I have pages of stats, if you would like to see them, that share that your audience or your clients are definitely on these apps. But still, let's say someone is just convinced that they're not or wouldn't care to hear from me. What would you say to someone that isn't entirely convinced?
Well, the stats that you found was like people up to age 65 are high TikTok users, like 10% of them at least are using it. It doesn't matter if you think that people aren't using it, because socially, these are discovery platforms. They're where you see pictures of your family and your friends. So that's where everyone's going before bed. Why not be there? It doesn't have to be like some buttoned up tweet from a brand at noon every day,
So we know we have to create the content. We know we have to be consistent about it. I mean, there's only 2 million people that have the opportunity to call themselves a full-time content creator. I am one of them for work. But most of the time, it's a side hustle, right? It's something that you have to do on the side. Maybe you have to stay up late to create this. So I'm thinking scheduling. Like, how do you go about having that full-time job, but also I need to create content for my audience, for my clients. I've got to bust out a newsletter or a blog while I'm still taking meetings all day. How do you go about your scheduling of the content that you do?
Yeah. So I was making content part-time while also having a full-time job for about a year. And it is definitely a balancing act. So I was writing my newsletter and then also making TikTok videos. So I think like a lot of it is just squeezing in stuff after hours, depending on the flexibility of your job. So I think reading throughout the day, reading throughout the week, doing that research. I like to use Notion. This is not like paid or anything. I just really like them. But Notion is
not sponsored.
I wish. Notion, please contact me. But
my DMs are open.
You can do your notes in Notion or like a different note-taking app. And I think just like making sure that you have some sort of system in place. Like it's really systemizing that. It's like a part-time job. In that sense,
It's hard. It is harder than I think people give credit for. Emily, how about you?
Agreed about just note-taking. I'll use voice memos. If I have an idea while I'm driving, I'll do a voice memo on my iPhone. And sometimes that becomes a podcast or a mini pod. Just do it when it strikes you and be paying attention, and you'll be inspired and take those ideas down. But another tip would be if you use a social media scheduling tool, like there's a bunch, Hootsuite, Buffer, et cetera. There's one actually called lately.ai, and this is also not sponsored, but what's cool about this tool is you can say, please reshare this post every 6 weeks, or you could do it at different intervals, and then you don't have to think about it again. It's this myth that once you share something, you don't want to bombard the audience by resharing the same thing. Most of your audience won't see that particular post. You can reshare it if you put all that work into crafting it and getting the emojis and the spacing right. Don't throw it away on one time. So I like Lately for that, just repurposing what you've already done.
Yeah, I mean, and we were kind of getting at repurposing, and that actually is a great way to help with the scheduling, right? Since we're throwing out a platforms we like, I mean, Typefully, I'm pretty sure is free to use for anyone with a Twitter handle, so check that out. It allows you to, not sponsored also, but allows you to schedule tweets throughout the week. So I know I use it so that I can be on the stage and I'm still tweeting, guys. Isn't that crazy? But those are some of the tools that you can use. There's plenty of ways to automate your posting and the things that go on so that you can be focused on your job during the day, and then tweets and social are happening. Which kind of also makes me think about I will say I've had my days where engagement is popping off on Twitter, and all of a sudden I have now spent my entire day on Twitter. It's kind of my job, so that's okay on my front. But so then, how do you manage not getting so bogged down in the engagement if something pops off, or like, yeah, or just scrolling, the doom scrolling. How do you avoid that?
I'll have days where I spend a lot of time on Twitter and then I'll take a break for a few days. I don't know. I think it's like control your dopamine and sometimes just put your phone away and say, I'm working for something else on an hour, right? It's like atomic habits.
Yeah, yeah. The 90-minute sprints, right? Like, I will turn off. I will put myself on Do Not Disturb and work for 90 minutes straight on content. So instead of doom scrolling. But how about you? How do you manage it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's difficult because our brains like love the little,
I know.
clicking the notification bell or whatever. But yeah, I think like you have to sort of manage your feed. I think that's a big part of it. So like for me, like I designed my Twitter feed to be pretty research oriented, and that sort of helps with dopamine. Like you don't feel as much, you don't get as angry or you don't get that sort of hit. So I think that's important too. Is just managing your own content diet and making sure that you're not being as exposed to doom scrolling because of that. Yeah.
Right, and having kind of the balance there.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you? So yes, the scheduling and then avoiding the doom scrolling. What are some of maybe your tips of finding inspiration to actually like execute? Because I have a Google document called Nicole's Idea Brain Dump, where I just like throw every idea that I ever have. I'm like, this could be a TikTok or this could be a newsletter topic. A lot of that I do not actually get to. So, I mean, so you use Notion, you said, but what are some other ways to like actually execute and feel inspired to execute? For me, I like go to museums or try to find like pieces of art in the real world that can connect to this world, our finance world. But curious on your own personal versions of that.
That's a good point. I listen to podcasts from all different industries. My background's marketing and advertising, so I still get a lot of that information, and it always bleeds over into financial content. So my company is a service that financial advisors and other professionals would use to share their own voices. But it really harkens back to what is brand and what is it that people care about or want to listen to. Consistency is a piece of that. So I think podcasts are where I get a lot of inspiration. But yeah, going to museums and looking at art or just reading, like read books. Full books, and turn off social media. And everyone in this audience, like I'm sure these guys are all reading, but that's something that it's getting more and more rare. And if you can delve into one topic deeply for a while, it keeps your brain sharp. We don't do that anymore. We're out of school. And it's just quick. It's so quick, like every little bit of content, which is what we're telling you to do. But for the inspiration, I think going deep, really deep on just one idea for a while is useful.
Yeah, no, I just recently went to Mexico City, awesome, highly recommend. And it completely gave me, and going to like Frida Kahlo's house or like, and such a femme inspiration, and like seeing like the museums and art around like surrealism. And I was like, you know what? Surrealism, the concept of surrealism is exactly what fintech is. That may sound crazy, but surrealism is just taking the traditional things that we see every day that we're used to, mending it slightly so that our minds can think about it differently. That's what we're all here to do, right? That's why you like came here and came to Future Proof, so that you could, expand your mind in a different way. And guess what? Like your audience wants to hear that. They want to hear that experience from you, which kind of also gets me around to authenticity. I think a lot of people can struggle. I struggled to find my voice, to really be authentic in my content, to say, you know what? I should share that interesting thought I had about surrealism connecting to fintech because people will care. But how do you kind of go about that? Like, about going, yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're totally right in terms of like connecting the dots between seemingly disparate concepts, right? So like I think it was James Baldwin that basically said you can learn a lot more from literature than you can from like any sort of textbook. And I think that's really true, is like you have to be able to pull from philosophy, you have to be able to pull from different elements of literature, you have to be able to pull from, art. And it's not like, how do I make content out of it? It's just like, how do I sort of like become a better, more rounded person? Yeah. And I think like that's a big part of like turning back the dial a little. Like that's a big part of the content creation process. And to your point of authenticity, is if you're able to pull from like all these disparate concepts and help people through that process of like tying it all together and really like giving a more human element to finance, which it so desperately needs.
Yes.
I think that that's so important. So yeah.
Something that I think is effective about TikTok is you have such a short amount of time. And sure, there is I don't know what you would call it, like clickbait. What do you call it at the beginning of a TikTok video where someone,
the hook.
like the hook. Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing about what
hard.
we've been doing for so long is gated content, right? Like fill out this form, give me your email address, then you get my PDF. That doesn't work anymore, and Google isn't rewarding that anymore.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is just give them the value and do it at the beginning. It doesn't have to be a teaser. Like this is a thing on YouTube where they say, in this video, I'm gonna tell you the 3 ways to grow your business. But they don't get to it till the 7th minute. And everyone skips ahead or they just cut and run. But now you have to be valuable and just give it away for free because the attention span isn't there for anything less than that.
Yeah. Well, and that's what really got me so hyper interested in the creator economy was this idea that I'm writing for these B2B trade publications that have these the walls over it, subscription walls, and I'm sitting here writing about democratizing access to financial services and tools, and it's paywalled, and I'm like, hey, it seems odd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so it feels a lot more mission aligned with what we're trying to do here to give, you're right, that value right away, give it at the top. And guess what? Circling back, making this full circle, that then comes back to, oh my gosh, look at this human who is giving me a piece of content and letting me become smarter, just like that financial advisor, right? Why can't I be as smart as that financial advisor? Why can't I learn what they're learning? Why is it just them that get to know this inside secret? That's I think the opportunity that a lot of folks on TikTok had unlocked, and now we're all here having to catch up a little bit, right? So I want to talk about maybe some tips around actually creating some searchable and relatable content. As you said, I think that I TikTok Google things. If I need a hairdresser in a city I've never been before, I'm like TikTok. And I'll go to where someone has recommended. What are some of your top tips for actually creating content that's ends up being searchable, has good SEO, that kind of thing?
Well, on the SEO thing, that is also changing. So old school is let's get a lot of backlinks to our website, or let's keyword stuff, or let's do duplicate content and just change a few words on the page. It doesn't work anymore. But if you have depth of expertise, the algorithms will sniff that out. So having a lot of content, I'm talking blogs mainly, but then you can make that content snackable and share it out on social, maybe do some videos, do some audiograms. But the old hacks don't work. You have to actually be an expert and have the content there that shows it. So I think from a search perspective, the thing is Google is now showing TikTok videos, I think some Facebook videos.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a nascent feature, but they're showing those in the search results as well. So it does get indexed. There's value there. It's not like you're in this silo of, it's on TikTok, how do people find it? But it's going to be in Google search results too.
I think that's actually a problem with TikTok is it's everything disappears. And so sometimes videos will resurface after a few weeks and people will be like, this is old news. And it's yeah, because your algorithm served it late, sorry. So I think that is part of the problem. And I, in terms of SEO, I'm not the best person to talk about that. I don't know anything about it. But I think that if you're just able to, I actually think creating a library of content is really valuable because then you can link people to what you've talked about before. You can link back to old newsletters. You can link to videos that you've talked about this stuff before as well. Make different playlists within TikTok or on your personal website or your company website. So I really do think it's just about number one, as we talked about, being authentic about it, and then also just having a library that people can pull from. Yeah.
Well, I like the idea of the library because something I think about often is so your content is building a table or a piece of furniture, and you want to make that big piece of furniture and it have all of the things we've talked about today, right? Your authenticity, what matters to you, all that good stuff. And this can be considered evergreen content, something you're constantly sharing. You're doubling down on your message, your audience knows what you're about. But when you build that piece of furniture, there's a bunch of sawdust that comes out of that, right? and that sawdust is a single tweet. It's a quick video on TikTok or whatever. It's, the newsletter that you can maybe like pull from and create into 2 parts, and that way you've written one story but brought it into 2. So that's how I would think about it also. Anyway, that was just like my metaphor for like creating content. But okay, so I want to talk a little bit about audience. I think we're all in like very niche spaces. There's enough room for everyone to be on these platforms and have a really amazing audience and engagement. How did you kind of establish the audience that you would create for? Did you write it down? Were you like, I will create for this audience? Or did you have to find it along the way?
I guess I had an idea of the demographic, who's my customer. And the brand stuff, like I have a marketing agency and then I've got Wealth Voice. The customers are a little different, but they have a thirst for knowledge. They're intelligent. So I'm not going to dumb anything down. It's not for everybody. I think with TikTok, for example, like the audience might be broader, but there's so much great educational content there too. So to answer your question, I thought about who do I want to follow me and eventually do business with me, and what tone of voice would work for them, which happened to be my natural tone of voice anyway.
Yeah. That tone of voice is a hard one. How'd you?
So like for me, I really started making TikToks around like when GameStop was happening, because I felt like there was a big gap in what people were saying and what was happening. But also like I used to work at an institution and sort of experienced like how clients were educated, and I do think there is a really big gap in terms of like how finance talks to like 20 to 29-year-olds. Like there's just not a lot of content made for that demographic, which is really unfortunate. So I think like that's sort of how I thought about it. Is like I was like, oh, there's like a gap here. Like I think I could fill it. And so that's what I set out to do is sort of bringing along younger people, everybody really. But yeah, I think there's a big gap right now for that. Yeah.
That's a good tip. You could go, if you haven't started creating yet or you're just getting started, you could go on like, what is your favorite social platform? Spend a little time on it, and is there something missing that you wish you were seeing more of? It's a good tip, right?
Also with the audience thing, if you think about financial advice, there's a therapeutic element to it, and people want to be calmed down, reassured. There's so much negative news, and it's more than our nervous systems are ever meant to consume, and the just intensity and the pace is more than we can handle. So to have a calming voice, the guide, the Yoda, who knows what they're talking about, is huge. Money is more excitatory in the brain than sex, gambling, or chocolate. Daniel Crosby, he talks about this all the time, and I think it's key. If you have a therapist that you know, like, and trust, that feels good. Like, that's a relationship. I think there's a total parallel with getting financial advice in that manner, which should be less formal, and it shouldn't be buttoned up and like, branded, right?
No, exactly. And I think, what are your thoughts on once you've like created the content, you've established your audience and your brand voice, and you're filling these opportunity gaps, you're rocking and rolling. How important is it to kind of also figure out a way to make that a community, right? Do events need to happen, right? Should you host happy hours? What's your take on that? Like the flywheel effect after you've created a content, maybe established a little bit.
Personal relationships. I mean, this is something we were talking about at dinner the other night, that it maybe 6 or 7 years ago, it wasn't quite appropriate to text your customers or clients. And like, okay, we're on email, maybe we're on Slack, but you don't have my cell phone number. And now I have all of my customers' number, and we're friends. And it's more of an intimate thing because, I mean, different businesses have too many to deal with. But yeah, having that connection. Sure, send them T-shirts, have a happy hour, like meet them in person here.
Make merch.
Yeah.
How about you? Do you think about that? Like more? More.
I don't know. I think that the current state of social media is actually like super interesting because I don't know if it's like super conducive to building out communities. Like hypothetically, yes. On Twitter, like I'm sure a lot of you are actually part of FinTwit. So like that's an example of a community that you can build into. But yeah, I think it's just like how do you get like-minded people sort of in the same space, whether that be digital or physical. There's a lot of opportunities to sort of build around that and figure out what the best way to build a community is. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of going back to the value, and once people are invested in you as a person or a creator, they're gonna follow everything that you do, and they won't stray as long as you're doubling down on those values. And just the flywheel effect that can happen from creating content is pretty cool. Eventually, you could start thinking about it. You could start to make guides. You can start to make things that people would pay money for just to be a part of your community. And that's a large shift that has been pushed by the Gen Z demographic, right? They will buy something from someone because they feel like they want to be their friend. People didn't line up through the door to go eat Mr. Beast's new burger, to have a good burger. They lined through the door so they could maybe catch a glimpse of him, so that they could purchase his merch, so they could take pictures together and post it on social. So just like, you never know what could happen really in that realm. All right. Before we get into our lightning round, we're almost done, guys, I want to also hit on, as women, creating in this space, being a woman in media is it's a thing. You have to move carefully a little bit. You're a little bit more prone to scrutiny. So how do you navigate the haters? That's what the kids call them. If you've run into that, Kyla, I think you definitely have in what you do. How do you kind of just
yeah, I mean, it's super hard. Like, I've gotten death threats, all that fun stuff. But, you just have to keep on trucking along. I wish there was like an off switch. I turned off my DMs, and that helped. But there isn't really a good way to moderate that right now. It's just something that you do have to sort of build muscle around. Like at first, I did not know how to manage that. But you just have to sort of get used to it, which is like, I don't know, if somebody else has an answer, please flag me down after and tell me. Yeah.
Someone told me once, when I was having trouble on like Twitter with some haters, it was like, exercise your right to the block button.
Yeah. It's true.
I haven't had a lot of haters. I'm lucky. I don't have.
You're loved.
Just remember, if someone's taking the time out of their day to say something nasty to you, like, their problems are much worse.
Yeah.
Have some compassion, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the whole thesis around what I created with What the Fintech was that if we could bring more women in media, more women in finance, have them come together, put them at the center of our industry's narrative, then maybe we would see more women and diverse groups of people want to actually work in this industry because they can see that there's an opportunity for them to level up. Hey, thank you. Which would then inherently create the more inclusive product offerings that we could put into the hands of the people that we claim that we want to serve. So that's what I think about that. Thank you for the applause. All right, lightning round. Oh my God, 2 minutes. Okay, so what's your favorite social media platform and why?
I'd say Twitter. That's the reason I'm on this stage. Everything happened on Twitter. And yeah. That's where I love that it's 280 characters. It's quick. You can get a real feel for somebody just by looking at their latest tweets, and that's where I end up most of the time.
Yeah. All right,
Twitter.
Surprise us.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I can't. It's Twitter. I've met some of my best friends on there. Have had so much support, so much love from that platform. So yeah,
love it. How do you measure success with your content?
I would say engagement.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether that's downloads or listens or clicks, but you can't only go by that because it doesn't happen every time.
Yep.
Emails that I get that say that it's helped or that they've learned something, comments saying that they've learned something, that's all that matters.
I agree wholeheartedly. Don't get so bogged down on the vanity metrics, all right? You can have 1 million followers, but they might not be so invested in you. You could have 5,000, which is like what I got, but those people are invested in me as a person, and that's pretty cool. So, all right. What's your favorite type of content to create?
Mini pods.
That's cool.
I love making videos.
The videos?
Yeah.
All right. I don't know. So I'm writing newsletters right now, but I really want to start making little videos more often as well. Yeah. It's tons of fun. But all right, well, with 30 seconds left on the clock, is there anything, final words you'd like to share, pieces of advice, words of wisdom?
Just start somewhere and just be yourself. And don't get bogged down by all these different platforms. You don't have to be everywhere.
Amazing.
Yeah, if you're passionate about something, share it with the world.
Fabulous. All right, thank you so much for hanging out with us this afternoon. All right.